In this video, I'll be unboxing, swatching, and painting with the Rembrandt Watercolor Landscape Selection palette. Hey everybody! This week I'm back with another video and a new palette. This one is the Landscape Selection by Rembrandt. I am nervous but also excited to use this palette. I am definitely not a landscape artist, as you will see in my video today. But I am trying to do new things and grow as an artist, and so I feel like this is a great way to do that. Rembrandt is a professional quality paint. This set is inside an aluminum palette. There are 12 colors and also a pocket brush. First, I will stretch these aluminum tabs backwards so that I'm able to get the pans out. They're individually wrapped and there's quite a bit of information on each of the wrappers. It'll tell you the color name in a couple different languages, which pigments are in each color selection, the light fastness rating, and also a number and series for each color. So we'll just unwrap that. This travel brush that's included is a size 4 round, and it is red sable as well. When this brush is wet, it comes to a very nice point, great for details, and has a lot of spring to it. For the swatch chart, I'm just using 140-pound paper with a ruler and a pencil. So here we get to see the first look of the colors. Right off the bat, you can tell that there's quite a few different shades of yellow, 2 different reds, one warm, one cool. We have a burnt sienna, a couple shades of blue, and 2 greens. The colors are beautiful. They're quite vibrant, and right off the bat I can tell that this is an advanced palette. There's going to be a lot of mixing that needs to happen. Typically palettes will have a more neutral color, either it being a neutral tint or a Payne's gray, potentially even a black, to help you mute your colors. But for this set in particular, you'll have to have a good foundation of color theory and understand how complementary colors work. Colors are very complicated, and I'm by no means an expert. But during the painting portion of this video, I will tell you some observations that I've made about the colors in this set. In addition to a larger swatch sheet, I always like to make a small one that fits inside the lid of my palette. So I just cut some 140-pound watercolor paper to fit, and I'm going to go through with each color and the pocket brush and swatch them out. Next, I will laminate this sheet, and I'll just keep it in the lid of my palette. So then that way, if I'm ever on the go, I can just take the palette and I'll know what each of the colors are going to look like. I'll have my larger swatch sheet in my studio for reference. So I don't normally just sit down with a new palette and mix a bunch of different colors and see what the palette can do, but I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I am not a landscape artist. I have rarely painted landscapes. It's just not my thing, really. I enjoy them. I think they're beautiful. I love it when other people do them. I just enjoy portraiture and, other types of painting more. But I wanted to try this out, and so I thought it would be beneficial to mix a bunch of different colors, just see what the limits of the palette are. Then I promptly decided that I'm going to paint a huge watercolor painting of an epic scene with a really stormy sky and a whole bunch of mountains in the background. Oh, and then may as well just throw a dragon in there. Okay, now all of a sudden I'm doing a Lord of the Rings landscape, and I didn't really have a plan for this painting, which is just a recipe for disaster. Especially, when you're doing landscapes. I don't know very much about landscape painting with watercolor, but I do know that you are supposed to paint things like the sky and just let them be, but instead I overworked everything. And this painting is not really going to be a great example of what to do when you do a watercolor landscape. It just kind of is me figuring it out. I'm going to tell you guys what I learned along the way, and hopefully that will give you a little bit of insight. Here's the materials I'm going to be using today. I'll be painting on a 140-pound hot press block by Fabriano. Of course, we're going to be using the Rembrandt Landscape Selection watercolor palette. Also, acrylic ink, some mixing wells to keep our palette clean. These are silicone brushes for applying frisket. Next, I'm going to be using an assortment of Neptune brushes from large to small to do washes and details, a spray bottle to keep our palette wet and for our wash, and also some frisket. So first I'll begin with the frisket. I'm just going to apply this to the figure in the front, which is the Witch King in his fell beast. So this is going to be a fan art piece from The Lord of the Rings. So I have him kind of perched up on a rocky, dilapidated building. So that frisket is going to help me be able to do a really wet wash of water on the background and not worry about the detail and the paper underneath. So I'm going to begin with doing a really wet wash of just water, and I'm putting a variety of different colors in the background, mainly the ultramarine and burnt sienna, because when mixed together those make a really nice gray. The block, normally I would do this painting in my sketchbook, but I decided to do this on a watercolor block. That way I can tilt it up to different angles. It's about, I'd say, at a 40-degree angle, and that way the water can drip down in the sky, and it will give us really beautiful, unpredictable washes. And like I mentioned earlier, you're just supposed to let them be. You're really not supposed to overwork it, but I just can't help myself. I don't really know what I'm doing for landscapes. I'm just going for it. And if something doesn't look how I want it to look, I just mess with it. So I'm making the foreground a little bit darker and the background near the horizon line a lot lighter. Now that I have all of my background colors loosely plugged in, I'm going to remove the frisket on the subject matter in my foreground. I'm just using a pickup eraser to do this. If you use a lot of frisket, I highly recommend them. I am going to use a fair amount of the acrylic ink in the foreground. It is permanent when dry, so basically I'm going to do a really loose grayscale underpainting of the image. And basically what that's going to do is allow me to glaze some color over the dragon in the building. And like I said, I really have no game plan here. All I know is I want the subject matter up front to be higher contrast and have more detail. As I know in landscapes, you're supposed to do less detail in the background, more detail up front. And perhaps that's why I have such a hard time with them. I want everything to have a ton of detail. So the acrylic ink, I'm just watering it down and doing some washes. And when I want its full strength, I don't add any water. I just apply the ink directly to the page. Next, I'm going to use the brown, red, and purple in the palette, the burnt sienna, the violet, and the permanent matter lake to glaze the dragon. I also do know in landscapes that you're supposed to have the warmer tones up front and the cooler tones off in the background for atmospheric perspective's sake. So I'm really going to push that, and I'm going to do lots of warm stuff up front and try to keep the background as cool as possible. So as you can see, the color just glazes right over the ink, and I'm just trying to mix some dark browns. And I did find out some really interesting things about this palette that I'm just going to briefly point out. So the way that this palette is organized, are that the colors that are complementary to each other are lined up on top and bottom. So first I'm pointing out the yellow-orange and the blue-violet. You can see how they're opposite of each other on the color wheel, which means that they're complementary colors. The same goes with the orange and the blue. So again, we have it with the red and the green, and last but not least, the red-orange and the blue-green. When you mix complementary colors with each other, you get a muted or dull version of that color. This is really wonderful for creating harmony within your painting. Because I'm not familiar with all of the colors in this palette, I've opted just to use a selection. The colors that I've chosen for this piece are Raw Sienna, Permanent Madder Lake, which is an alizarin crimson replacement, Permanent Red Medium, which is a cadmium red replacement, Burnt Sienna, Ultramarine Deep, Blue Violet, and Hooker Green Light. My goal for using these limited colors from the selection of landscape colors is to help set a tone and have a really deliberate, cool, and warm set of colors that I'm familiar with to help me. Essentially, I am just figuring out how to paint this based off the photo reference, and I'm just giving it my best shot. So I plugged all the colors in that I saw from the multiple reference photos I'm looking at, and you'll see me paint an area and then paint back over it, paint over it again. I'm having a hard time with depth, and I think it probably doesn't help that I'm using a bunch of different reference photos as opposed to just one. And I kept going back into the sky. I couldn't decide how dark I wanted it or how light I wanted it, so it was a lot of just figuring things out. The colors layered really beautifully over each other. They're all transparent colors. That's why I like to add in the acrylic ink. It's a really fluid medium that you can pair with your watercolors, and essentially it just makes them more opaque. So, you're able to go over areas and lighten them up quite a bit, or if you want to cover over them completely with a different color, that's a great way to do it. I glazed over the entire back set of mountains with a white acrylic ink because I just wanted to push them back a little bit more. So overall, I am happy that I had the experience of painting this because it's unlike other things that I do, and I feel like I learned a lot from it. I'm excited to continue using this palette and hopefully learn a thing or two about watercolor and landscapes. So if you are a landscape watercolor artist, please feel free to roast me in the comments, or alternatively, give me some tips so that I can get to your level. But yeah, I think that this is a challenging palette for me just because I don't do landscapes. But I'm excited to keep using it. And I think that next time I do use it, I'm going to paint something really green. Like, I probably should have just painted the Shire or something. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great week.